I'm Bob Mayer. This car, a 1959 Ford Fairlane 500 Skyliner, was featured on the cover of Hemming's Classic Car magazine recently, along with a 7-page spread. It's also won a national first place award. This is my baby. You know, I took my 59 Ford Skyliner retractable convertible to a shop that specializes in classic car maintenance. Dean Miller's looking it over, so I'm going to take a run over and check on its progress. Hey, Dean.
Hey, Bob. How's it going?
Good. Just coming to check on my baby.
It's doing really good.
Good. Have you found where the leaks are coming from?
Well, there's a couple things I wanted to talk about. Some issue with this panel. We'll talk about that in a minute. Okay. We did find a couple leaks on the tranny. Initially on the actual pan gasket for the transmission, a little bit on the dipstick tube, and then a major leak on the shift shaft. It has 2 seals there, so I ended up having to take the pan off, take off the valve body and the accumulator, and pull the shaft out, change, one's a seal and one's an O-ring. But that seemed to solve the leak. I've checked it for a couple days in the morning.
You know,
and no more flood.
This thing always had a couple drips on the floor. Most old cars do.
Sure.
But in the last couple of months, it got terribly worse. There was a pretty darn big puddle on the floor. Did something just fail, or what happened?
Yeah, I don't think anything actually mechanically broke. It's just a factor of wear. And when cars like this aren't driven on a daily basis, the seals will tend to dry out. The transmission fluid kind of leaches some of the petroleum out of the seals, and they just shrink a lot. You know, so it's still in place. It's not busted or in pieces or cracked, but they just shrink a lot, and that, you know, gives space for the fluid to come out.
So I saw transmission fluid, but I think I also saw something that looked like oil.
Well, we didn't talk about that, but there's some leaks from the power steering system that are very minimal. They're just weeping. They're not actually leaks where it'll make drips on the ground, so it just stays moist, which is a normal function of cars this age. A lot of things will stay a little bit wet. It's really not considered a leak until it actually drips to the ground. All of this from the previous leaks that have been repaired has worn the paint off of the bell housing and the converter cover. That all needs to be addressed with a little TLC and prepped and repainted just to bring it back up to 100%. Same with the tranny pan. Needs a little bit of TLC to clean it up and just make it look the way that it did before the leak started. But none of that is actual mechanical in nature, just a cosmetic issue. Several leaks on the motor, the oil pan gasket, valve cover gasket, and intake manifold gasket were all leaking oil. The worst being the intake manifold gasket in the back near the transmission where the intake meets the block. It has a cork type seal, which is, you know, common, the regular type seal in that time period, and the cork itself tends to dry out really, you know, hard, and it becomes porous and lets the oil get past.
Did you change it with another kind of gasket?
Yeah, I changed it to a rubber type, which it basically lasts maybe 3 or 4 times as long, and it's a lot better at dealing with temperature changes and lack of use, you know, not driving it on a daily basis. So it tends to be a lot more resilient and, you know, able to deal with that type of situation much better than the cork.
So is what you're seeing here the norm or unusual for a car like this?
No, actually, normally I would see, most cars I see like this are in much worse shape. This car is in spectacular shape. That's just regular wear, you know, just normal wear, especially with you had all the factory type gaskets, but with the improvements and upgrades in the gaskets, everything I put on was changed to the rubber type. You'll tend to get maybe 2 or 3 times the service life out of the gaskets.
Well, the car originally was restored with an aim at putting it back exactly like it came out of the factory.
Sure.
But I'm at the point now where we just want to keep it running good.
Yep.
And you know, with as few problems as possible.
And with these parts that I put on, and generally I do this for this type of car, if it was something that you could see at any point, if you would be able to tell visually, I probably would put back the original one. But since these are all parts that can't be seen from normal looking at the car, it's always a good upgrade to go to the rubber.
Yeah. Who's going to know?
Nobody will.
Right.
Except you and me, Bob.
Right. And I'm not telling anybody.
Me either. The other issue I wanted to mention was these rocker panels are a little bit dry. They need a little bit of service. Nothing bad. It's not actual rust. Just, you know, the paint's a little bit worn and faded. The rest of the paint on the car looks absolutely beautiful, but this just needs a little bit of attention, just a couple hours on each side.
I must tell you, you know, this normally you don't see it at all.
Sure.
I wax the car regularly, but I don't think I've ever been under waxing this part, and I guess you can see that.
Yeah, and as far as, like you're saying, cosmetically it doesn't make any difference, but it's just to prevent like a long-term process where there'd be some rust eventually getting on the car. I've looked the whole car over, there's no actual rust damage, but just to prevent that from happening,
Right.
It's a good thing to service it up.
Okay, so I noticed something over here that I want to get your opinion on. I have no idea what this is, but this piece of rubber, it looks like it's worn through.
Yeah,
So
that's your
what is that?
actual parking brake cable, and it's got a braided type outside with a another cable on the inside, and the rubber has failed, but mechanically it's still working normally.
So it's just aesthetically at this point.
Just an aesthetic issue, and it hasn't failed mechanically at all. It looks like everything looks great. Just the rubber has failed, probably from leaks. You know, when the fluid in the past before they were fixed gets on the rubber, it kind of, you know, damages it a little bit through time. But once again, it's just all cosmetic.
Okay, any other suggestions as to things you might want to do?
The only other issue that I noticed was the AC compressor was not coming on, and that needs to be taken apart to service the brushes.
Now that just started. I mean, this air conditioner has been blowing ice cold for 20 years. Haven't even added Freon. So what's causing it not to go on now?
Well, the brush is a wearing part like a brake pad. So the whole entire time that the AC pulley is spinning, it's the brushes are stationary and they're spring-loaded, pushing against it. So as it's running, it's slowly wearing the brush down, like it does in all older style electrical parts. Newer stuff has some brushless type, but everything in this air, the brushes have to be changed on a regular basis, normal wearing part.
Not connected actually to the compressor. That's fine.
No, the compressor itself seems to be working normally. If we can get the brushes changed, that would probably solve the problem. Sometimes I can repair the brushes. Other times they have to be replaced, but it's a very simple repair. It takes a few hours, but nothing complicated.
Did you notice that this car has a heavy, solid steel frame? It's strengthened by an X pattern in the middle, and cross members add even more support.
So Bob brought in his car for some minor fixes and repairs. I did find a few more things that needed to be done. When you have a vintage car, you always have to be on top of the maintenance. And even though I razzed Bob a little bit about not waxing the rocker panels, he does a great job with the maintenance on his car.